Before I introduce Ben, I just want to thank our sponsor today, Picnic Health. We're really able to provide these community talks in large part because of our community sponsorships. And Picnic Health is a new sponsor to us this year. And so we are going to spend the first 5 minutes of today hearing from Ashley from Picnic Health. They really provide a unique service. So I want to give everyone a chance to hear from them. And then at the end of today's presentation, we'll have another few minutes for some question and answer if you have any questions for Ashley. And again, you're always welcome to type those in the chat as well. So Ashley, without further ado, I will turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Melissa. And thank you everyone for being here. Picnic Health is truly honored to be able to sponsor these types of events, especially when it comes to really providing the community with resources and the information that they need in order to be able to navigate their journey as a caregiver. So Picnic Health, what we do is we connect patients with researchers. And so Picnic Health is a health technology company that works in the area of electronic medical records and real world data research. So many of you have probably questioned before, how can I contribute to the fight against Alzheimer's? I want to be involved in research studies, but I'm not really sure how to do that. Well, we're excited to share about a type of groundbreaking research that we at Picnic Health work in, and it's called real world data research. It takes less than 10 minutes to sign up, and you can do this online from home. Essentially, what you're going to do is if you have an Alzheimer's diagnosis, or on behalf of a loved one, if you're a caregiver for someone with an Alzheimer's diagnosis, you're able to sign up for a Picnic Health account. And I'll go over what that looks like in the next slide. And on top of that, as a benefit for signing up, you'll get the free Picnic Health account, a $25 gift card, and you're going to contribute towards the fight in Alzheimer's by being part of research. And so researchers desperately need to better understand what Alzheimer's is really like. We understand that every patient journey is unique, and we realize that sometimes not everyone can participate in traditional clinical research trials. And so we want to give everyone the opportunity to really share their story so that we can help find those missing puzzle pieces for the next Alzheimer's breakthrough. It's important that your voice is included in research. Again, we understand every patient journey is unique. And the way that Picnic Health works is we use electronic medical records that are de-identified and anonymized so that we can contribute towards some of these breakthroughs. And so we look for specific data points that our researchers are looking for. We provide them these de-identified data points, and those contribute towards the research they're conducting, and in many cases even complements clinical trials. And so the way that it works, so together we can change the future of Alzheimer's, right? You would have access to your electronic medical records at Picnic Health. We truly believe that it's important for patients and caregivers to really be in charge of their health, to own their health, and be their best advocate. And so as a free benefit for joining, you'll have access to the Picnic Health timeline, which you can see right here. What that is, it's a way for you to organize all of your medical records. You can see that we organize them chronologically, and you'll have access to imaging, you'll have access to labs, office visits. You get all of your doctor's notes all in one area. And our goal with this is that, again, you will be your best advocate. You're really able to look through all of your doctor's notes, through your labs. You can go to your doctor's appointments and say, ask the questions that you're really confused about, so that you can go better informed. Additionally, we do want to let you know that when it comes to gathering all of your medical records for you, we do all of the heavy lifting. We cover all of the costs associated with gathering them. We take care of the doctor, of the calling your physician's office, of the faxes, all of that, so that we can make it as easy for you as possible. We understand that being a caregiver for someone with Alzheimer's, it's a full-time job. And we want to make sure that we make it easy as possible for you to be able to have all of this available. And then again, going back to how that contributes to research. So when you sign up for a Picnic Health account, you are able to consent to donate a part of your medical history to research. We anonymize that data for you, so you never have to worry about your information. It is always protected. Your privacy comes first and foremost to us. And we just really want, again, to make sure that your voice is represented in the fight against Alzheimer's. So as Melissa indicated, we will have time afterwards for Q&A, but we really appreciate you allowing us to be here. If you do have more questions, feel free to email me at ashley.ferreira@picnichealth.com. And if you are interested in signing up for a Picnic Health account, you can follow this link, www.picnichealth.link/ALZOC. We, again, are very grateful for your time, and we look forward to hearing to Ben's presentation.
Thank you so much, Ashley. All right, I am going to turn it over to Ben. And for those of you, I mean, Ben needs no introduction really, but maybe for those of you who are new to us, Ben is one of our educators. He's a programs and education specialist, part of our memory support services team here at ALZOC. He is a longtime care partner for his wife and a wealth of knowledge on the topic of caregiving and dementia. So Ben, take it away.
Thank you, Melissa. And thank you, Ashley, for sponsoring this program today. Let me talk just a little bit about my wife, Judy, because really what I'm going to talk about today is our journey. She and I together over the last 12 plus years. She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's just about 12 years ago. And it's been a long road, and who knows how much longer it is. Let me back up. This picture was taken about 6 years ago. At this point, Judy was pretty high functioning, was mobile, and she would respond really well when there was live music in the community where she was living at the time. And so if I could see that she was having a pretty good day, I'd get her up on her feet and wrap my arms around her, and we'd begin to move a little bit to the music. And it was very clear to her, and I could sense in her expression and just her overall body language that she completely understood we were dancing, and even though it wasn't dancing in the way that we used to, it was still an expression of our relationship, our connection, and really that's a big part of what I want to talk about today, is finding ways to make a connection. So for us, music has been a big part, but there are lots of ways to make a connection, and it's really all about finding that path that works, that your loved one resonates with. And still today, even though her symptoms are significantly more advanced, and at this point, she requires total care, is unable to do any of the activities of daily living for herself, and yet can still see her personality, the connection, her response to music. That's still a big part of how we connect and how we spend time together. So I want to talk about some of the things that I've learned along the way over the last 12 plus years. When I say plus, I refer to 12 years ago was when she was diagnosed, but as is always the case, there is some period prior to that where things are changing, though we didn't really understand what it was that was causing those changes. And so it was a period of frustration, intense frustration on her part, confusion on my part, and just a really difficult time in our lives as we struggled to figure out and then respond and adapt. And I want to talk more about adapting as we go along today. So one of the things that I needed to learn very early on is what did that mean that she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's? And many people have asked me, well, what's the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? And so very briefly, I just want to explain, if you don't know already, dementia is a term we use that's a very generic term that covers a collection of symptoms. All of those symptoms are related to cognitive decline in some form, in some aspect of cognition, whether it's memory, thinking, behavior in a variety of ways. So dementia is referring to symptoms, doesn't describe the cause. Alzheimer's is the #1 cause of dementia. It is by far the most common. And so we will often talk about Alzheimer's and sometimes use the terms interchangeably, but really that's the distinction. Alzheimer's is only one form of dementia. And the severity of that varies widely. It may be mild in the early stages, and then as it progresses, becomes increasingly more severe. But Alzheimer's, someone who's been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, by definition, has dementia, maybe mild dementia, but it's still a dementia, and there are many different kinds. There are actually about 120 different diseases that cause dementia. But again, Alzheimer's is #1. There's a handful of other causes that are relatively common, such as we see on the left side of this illustration, Lewy body dementia or frontotemporal degeneration or vascular dementia. Parkinson's disease has a form of dementia. Huntington's disease, much more rare, and something that's been termed CTE, which you've probably heard about, stands for chronic traumatic encephalopathy. So if you've heard about professional football players and other sports where the repeated blows to the head result in a degenerative process, that's what's come to be known as chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And all of those are irreversible forms of dementia, irreversible in that they are progressive, they continue to get worse, and we have no cures. And so they will continue to progress and cause increasing difficulty with everyday tasks and have significant negative impact on our ability to make connections with a person that we're caring for. Now, in addition to those irreversible causes, there are some potentially reversible causes of dementia, and depression is one, probably one of the more significant of the reversible causes of dementia. Depression impacts the brain and hinders cognitive function, and yet it can be reversed with appropriate treatment. And I will tell you from my own experience, I've been through periods in my life, and one of those periods has been along the journey with Judy, trying to figure out, so how do we deal with the reality of the road that we're on? And there have been many times where I've recognized, boy, I need help. I cannot do this on my own. I needed to see a counselor and still do from time to time when I need some additional support. And speaking of support, having other people around me, I'm really blessed to have a work group that is incredibly supportive. It's such a privilege to be able to work with my friends at Alzheimer's Orange County. So some other reversible causes, medications we know can sometimes impact cognition. So it's important if there's a new medication and there are changes that you observe, to talk to your doctors and discuss that and see if maybe there's an issue of dosage or conflict of medications that might be impacting the cognition of the person you're caring for. There are some nutritional deficiencies that can lead to cognitive symptoms. Anemia, which is caused by a lack of vitamin B12, can impact cognition. Vitamin D, a low level of vitamin D can also be a factor. And always when I refer to those, I want to be clear, I'm not saying that you should go out and get supplements for those. But if you have a concern, if you're wondering whether it might be a factor, it's important to talk to a doctor. I did that myself. I was wondering if vitamin D might be a factor for myself. And I asked my doctor, so what do you think about that? He said, well, probably not, but let's find out. And it's very simple with a blood draw to check on the levels of vitamins. And as it turned out, I was low in vitamin D. And so his recommendation was that I take so many units of vitamin D, which I still do. But to do that on your own, you don't know whether you really need it, and it's probably a waste of money unless you really do need it. So I just encourage you to check that out. If you're wondering, if you're concerned, talk to your doctor about it, because it can be easily tested. And speaking of easy tests, another reversible cause is thyroid disease. And in the process of Judy's evaluation, the diagnostic tests, one of the first things that they tested for was low thyroid hormone. And as it turned out, she was low in thyroid hormone. And so they wanted to see if that was the underlying cause of her symptoms. So they gave her a supplement, and about a month later retested her hormone level and her cognition to see if boosting the hormone level would resolve any of her symptoms. Well, it turned out it didn't. She still needed that hormone supplement, but that wasn't the cause. But for some people, it can be. So it's important to find out. And one last area is infections. A chronic infection can affect the brain. So specifically, we're talking about pneumonia, urinary tract infections, even gum disease. Untreated infections can impact cognition and cause symptoms of dementia. And fortunately, when it's identified and treated, those can be resolved. But untreated, they are significant risk factors for the development of an irreversible dementia, including Alzheimer's disease. So I just wanted to start there and make sure that we're on the same page in terms of understanding Alzheimer's. So when I refer to Judy's diagnosis and some of the challenges that we have faced, you have this context. All right, so 3 lessons. As I've thought about this journey, it's come down to 3 significant things. And number 1 is that I need to learn to see the world with new eyes. And I use this illustration, which is adapted from a very interesting map of the world, which looks at the continents in a different way to show them with the accurate relative sizes one to another. Now, when I first saw this, I looked at that and I went, boy, that's weird. But the more I've looked at it, the more I've come to say, okay, I get it. That makes sense. And so that's very much what I've had to do with Judy's dementia. You know, at first, and there have been many times where Judy would say something, ask a question, do something, and I would think, that's really weird. And it's really easy to, at least it's been my experience, to take that perspective, that mindset, and even to voice, say, what do you mean? That doesn't make sense. Or to think or say, what's wrong with you? Can't you see whatever? Well, the reality is that as the disease, whatever it is, whether it's Alzheimer's or another kind of dementia, is impacting their brain's ability to function and perform daily tasks, their world changes. And it's unrealistic to think that I can change the way Judy sees the world. That it really is different from the way I see it. So I have to learn to adapt. That's really the key. That for me, the most significant adjustment is just to see things differently, to try to get into her world and see things as she does. And then I can begin to accept and respond without that attitude of, what's wrong with you? I begin to understand what is wrong. And so that leads me to my next point that I just want to talk briefly about. Part of understanding and seeing her world is recognizing that the changes I see in her, in how she would express herself, and the actions that she would take, are the result of damages that are taking place in her brain because of the disease of Alzheimer's. And so her memory would be affected because the disease is damaging that region of the brain, the hippocampus, where memory begins. And so her inability to remember things in the short term is not because she isn't trying. She is trying her hardest, doing her best to hold things together, and being judgmental and critical of her inability to remember is counterproductive. So understanding that these are physical changes of a pathology as a result of the Alzheimer's. And because Alzheimer's and these other forms of dementia are progressive, it's almost always more than one symptom. I mean, it's Alzheimer's is so much more than just memory. It at some point affects every cognitive function, which is what I'm trying to illustrate here. As it spreads through the brain, it affects language and the ability to express or to receive information, the ability to read. All of that is affected by the disease as the damage continues and causes literally the death of neurons in the brain. Those neurons that make up the networks within our brain that allow us to perform all these cognitive functions. So that includes our ability to think rationally, to think abstractly, to regulate our own behavior. What we sometimes refer to as our social filter. That is, we might think something that we wouldn't say out loud because we know it's not socially appropriate. But as damage takes place in that region of the brain where we regulate our behavior, that social filter may go away. And so we'll see people say and do things that we would think, wow, that's really inappropriate, and can be really awkward and embarrassing for those of us who are caring for someone with one of these diseases. Again, understanding that this is a result of damage from the disease, then we can begin to understand, we can begin to get into their world and see things as they do. So very quickly, just to say, every cognitive function at some point in the progression of the disease will be impacted. Emotional regulation, perception of senses, ability to understand the visual world will be affected. This was very true for Judy, and really quite early in her progression. Her vision became distorted, and she did not see things literally the way I would see them, and I would expect her to see them. And so it became a part of my responsibility to look for things that she wouldn't see, specifically physical hazards, things that she might trip over because she doesn't see them. Her brain just doesn't register that there's something there that might cause her to fall. And then finally, as these diseases progress, eventually they reach the brain stem, where the brain regulates reflexes like swallowing, manages all of our internal systems, major organ functions. So again, everything that our brain does controls and manages our entire body, and our personality will be affected at some point. And so I need to understand that in order to see the world as she does. So that leads me to my second lesson, which is when I begin to understand and see her world, then I can respond with compassion. If I'm always thinking, what is wrong with you? And trying my hardest to change the way she sees the world and the way she responds, I'm not being compassionate. And I would submit that all of us like to think of ourselves as being compassionate people. And so I've come to learn that responding with compassion takes practice. And so there are skills. These are 5 specific things that we can learn with practice to do that will allow us to approach the people in our lives who are struggling, whether it's with dementia or struggling with anything else that's just different. We can become more compassionate. And the first way we do that is to check the environment. Because when I recognized that Judy did not see the physical world, I mean, her vision was distorted, then it became incumbent upon me to look for those things that she wouldn't see. And so I would be constantly scanning the world around to see if there's something that's going to be either a threat to her or would simply be an impediment in us spending time together and finding that connection that we want to have. And so if we walk into a room and I've planned some activity that we're gonna do just to have a meaningful time together, I want to see if this physical space is going to be conducive. Maybe it's too noisy or too bright or too dark. Whatever it is in the environment, if it's going to get in the way of us making a connection, then I'm going to try to fix it. I'm going to make an adjustment, or maybe I can't change it, and so I need to go to plan B. Maybe go to a different physical space or some other activity that we can do together. So checking the environment's the first step. Number two is to facilitate a connection. And there are lots of ways that we can do that. The number one approach is to be face-to-face at eye level with the person you're caring for. If we are standing above, it's difficult for the person that we're caring for to see us. Part of the distortion of vision is the loss of peripheral vision. And so that's not just what's out here, but it's really a 360-degree view. And so if I'm standing above her when I'm talking, it's difficult for her to see me. So it's really helpful to get at eye level, face to face. And I've learned that before I start talking, I need to make sure that she can see me clearly. And literally be in front. If I walk into a room and her back is to me and I start talking, she probably doesn't even recognize that I'm talking to her. So face-to-face, eye level is an important part of connection. Another way to facilitate a connection is with touch. Just a simple, gentle, caring touch goes a long way to saying, I'm here. I'm with you. I don't have anything better to do. You have my full attention. And then that leads to number three, which is to be a good listener. And I have found that most of us are not naturally good listeners. There are a few in workshops I've led. If I ask, so how many of you are naturally good listeners? Out of a group of 20, there might be one person who would raise their hand and say, yeah, that's easy for me. Well, that's great. But for most of us, it's not. And it's something that we have to practice. And we'll make mistakes. And that's why we practice. And then we try it again. So being a good listener means eye contact, giving some nonverbals, maybe nodding, maybe a verbalization, just to let the person you're caring for know that you are focused, that you are engaged with whatever is happening, whatever they are saying. Number four is to focus on remaining skills, to be aware of what the individual is capable of doing. Whenever we plan an activity, whether it's for us spending time together, perhaps for someone else to step in while we step away and have some time for taking care of ourselves, we want to ensure that the activity we've planned is within their capability, because we don't want them to be failing or feel like they're not capable of whatever the task is. We want them to be successful. We want them to feel engaged and to be content. That's our goal. We want to find that zone where they're not bored to death, which leads to other problems. They're not overstimulated, but they're engaged contentedly. And so focusing on remaining skills is an important part. And so one of the things that I've learned to avoid is asking questions that would be difficult to answer. One of the simplest things, and I've seen this when other people would encounter Judy and ask her, how are you doing? For many people with dementia, just that question, how are you doing, is difficult to answer. And I'd watch her and I could see her kind of go up into her head and try to figure out what that question means and how is she, and she just gets lost in that process, and she really can't answer the question. So avoiding open-ended questions like that. Another example is, so what did you do today? That's a difficult question for someone with dementia to answer. So we learn to adjust, to phrase questions to make them easier to answer. And so instead of asking, how are you doing? I would first observe, take note of her body language to get an idea of how she's doing. And I could tell, if she was sitting up straight and looking around and smiling and hugging other people, I know she's having a good day. I don't even have to ask. And so I could approach her, and so my question would be much simpler. It would be like, are you having a good day? Which I can say with a smile, and she would say, yes. So try to phrase those questions to be simple, yes or no answer. Conversely, if I see she's kind of inward and kind of shut down, I can tell something's wrong, something's not going well. And so I can phrase the question then, are you having a hard day? And she would go, oh, I'm so sorry. Come on, let's go for a walk. Take her hand and we start walking. So make it easy. Don't challenge. Don't make it feel like everything is a test. Because for most of us, tests are anxiety producing. And that anxiety simply gets in the way of our cognitive processes, whether we have dementia or not. We want to avoid that anxiety. Our brain works better when we're not stressed. And finally, number 5 is to adjust. And I've talked about adjusting all along the way. In all of these skills that we're practicing, it's a matter of making adjustments. And I would submit that being a caregiver is all about adjusting, adapting, responding creatively. Someone has said that caregiving is like improv comedy, where we're given a situation and we just have to go with it. And respond positively, and just, okay, let's go wherever that's going to lead us. And so that's the nature of adjusting. So one of the areas that we really have to focus on adjusting is how we use language. Studies have shown that the words we use are only a small part of what gets communicated. And when I say that, what I mean is a message that actually gets across, that's received and understood. The words make up a small component of that. Most of what goes into that communication is our body language, our posture, our facial expressions, our gestures, and then our tone of voice, how we use our voice. And so I like to think, to remind myself, I want to have a smile in my voice. I want to use my voice to communicate. And so it becomes purposeful. As I think about, prior to walking into the room, what's the message I want to send? What do I want her to receive? Well, I want her to know that she's loved, that she's safe, that she's going to be cared for, that we're in this together. All of those messages I can purposely send. when I pay attention to my body language and my tone of voice and recognize that words are down the list. They're not as significant. Now, it's also true, just as my body language, my tone of voice communicate very clearly, if I choose to be observant of her body language and her tone of voice, I can learn a lot about what she is trying to tell me, even if she doesn't have the capacity to express it in words. So today, with Judy's, the state of her progression, which is very advanced, she is, for the most part, nonverbal. She might answer a very simple question about a quarter of the time. If I ask her, "Are you warm enough?" She might say yes. Or she might simply nod, or she might say nothing at all, verbally, non-verbally, just unresponsive. So as the progression advances, it becomes even more important that we're paying attention to body language and tone of voice, so that we can pick up a message. I like to think about listening for emotions. I want to get the emotion that she's trying to express to me, even if it's difficult for her to express. I can still pick it up if I will tune my ears to pick up emotion. I like to think of it like an old analog radio, where you'd have to adjust the dial to get on the right frequency to eliminate the static. That's what we're doing when we pay attention and listen for emotions. So my third lesson, I call this sharpen the saw. And this is an expression that really means take care of yourself. That is, invest in caring for your tools. A carpenter that never stops to sharpen the saw is going to be working harder and harder. And so I have learned as a caregiver, if I don't make time for myself to invest in renewing, refreshing, getting rest, I will be continually declining in my ability to function, my ability to provide the kind of support that Judy needs. So for me, to sharpen the saw is to do 5 things. And number 1 is to empower yourself. What I mean by that is to recognize that there are a lot of things in this journey that I don't control, but there are some things I do have control over. I can influence. And when I make that choice and I identify what I can do, what change I can effect, I have empowered myself. And that is inherently uplifting and renewing and refreshing. So I would just encourage you to think about, what can you control? Recognize that there are a lot of things in your life that just feel out of control, and that is true. And it is a tough it can be a rocky road. But empowering yourself will enable you to smooth out some of that rockiness. So number 2 is to connect with other people. So whether that's electronically, like we're doing today, or making time to get together with people in your world, people who can care about and support you, keeping connections is important. It is really easy. When I say that, I mean, there is a tendency for us as caregivers to withdraw, to become isolated. And we need to work against that tendency, and find ways to maintain connection. If for no other reason, it helps to keep our own brain sharp. Being with other people keeps us on our toes, so to speak, and constantly learning and adapting as we interact with other people. Number 3 is to create something. Now, this particular image is a watercolor painting that was done in our Memories in the Making art program for people with dementia. It's just one of my favorites. It is so vibrant and expressive, but it can be any kind of creation. One of the things that I did very early in the isolation of the pandemic in the year 2020 was to take an old set of wooden TV trays that were just in terrible condition and were about to be thrown out. And I thought, I wonder if I can refinish these. And that's not something I do. That's not a hobby, refinishing furniture. But I thought, this can't be too hard. And so I set about sanding and sanding and sanding, and then applying a stain and a finish. And they just turned out so well. And it just felt so good to take something that looked like a disaster and make something beautiful. And I use those TV trays every single day. And every time I look at them, it gives me pleasure. So create something. It may be just organizing a closet or cleaning out the garage. To go from chaos to order is creative and is uplifting. And so find something to create. It may be any of the expressive arts, making music, writing, any kind of creation, building something. If that's a hobby of yours, go for it. Number 4 is to move, be physically active. That is part of renewing and maintaining our own health. We need to be physically active. It supports our immune system, and helps us avoid other illnesses that would take us out of commission. So we need to be in the best position we can to support the person we're caring for. And then finally, number 5 is to breathe. And really breathing underlies all of the other 4, to take time, because it's natural to think, I have got so much to do, I just have to hurry, hurry, hurry. And sometimes I have to tell myself, stop, take a breath, slow down, allow that stress to just kind of percolate away, and then start again. So those are what I've determined to be my 3 most important lessons. So the picture I showed you earlier was about 6 years ago. This is a recent picture. I don't see Judy's smile a lot. anymore, but every once in a while, I'll get direct eye contact and maybe half a smile. And when I do, that's a good day. This was one of those days where we happened to be wearing the same color. That happens rather often. And part of the reason is that I'm wearing colors that I know she likes. That's part of a choice that I've made. I want to bring something into her life that is going to bring pleasure to her. And so it's serendipitous and just delightful when it just happens that we're wearing the same color.